Distorted Fate, written by Silvac. Chapter 18, School. My magic lessons didn't last as long as I had hoped. After being given further instructions, I was able to manipulate the telekinesis spell more effectively beyond just lifting, to the point where I was able to move and rotate objects. Sadly, the lessons had to end due to the exertion from using my magic, leaving me too drained to continue. Even so, I was fair to Twilight in regards to our deal, where I provided one word in my language of her choosing. Oddly, she asked for me to teach her how to say friend. It took me a moment to recall the word, but not due to the recent disuse, rather it was due to me barely using the word before I came here. You don't make many friends in my former line of work, but you sure do end up cursing like crazy. After fighting the temptation to instead teach Twilight a curse word for my amusement, I ended up seeing her trying to parrot the word only for her to fail miserably. At the rate she was going, I wouldn't be surprised if her tongue ended up in knots. Eventually, I had to take my leave since it was close to dinner time, and I didn't want to have Pinky search the entire town for me, which would probably end with her popping out of some bizarre place and scaring me. Twilight, however, chose to accompany me home, mostly to get some more practice on that word to my annoyance, though she did bring some books on basic reading for falls to help me learn their written words. While today ended with some success for me, the next day didn't greet me with the same fortune in the morning.
"You're so gonna love where we're going, Aether,"
Pinky said as I sat on her back while she bounced through the town while I was wearing my saddlebags that were stuffed with books, papers, and an object they called a pencil.
"How do you know? I do not even know where we're going."
"It's a surprise, silly."
"Remember the last surprise, Pinky?"
My question got her to stop, though she stopped in midair, which gave cause to my left eye to twitch at the impossibility. Even after a month of living with her, my brain still hurt whenever she did something completely illogical.
"Oh, don't worry, Aether, it's not that kind of surprise,"
Pinky remembered as she resumed her bouncing, to my brain's relief. Eventually, we came to a building in some clearing where I saw some fillies roaming around outside, but oddly few adults. Wait a minute. Sadly, before I could get my train of thought going, Pinky went around the side of the building and entered a side entrance into some sort of office from the looks of things. Sitting on a desk was a magenta-coated mare. Before her desk were a couple of stools, where Pinky dropped me on one before taking a seat herself.
"Good morning, Pinky. I take it that this is Aether?"
the mare said before she turned her attention towards me.
"Hello there, Aether. My name is Cheerily. Do you know why you are here?"
she said slowly. Why do most new ponies always go slow when they first meet me?
"Do not talk slow. I can figure out words that I know fine, just not the words I have not learned yet. Also, I do not know why I am here."
I deadpanned, causing Cheerily to blush in embarrassment.
"Well, you're here because Pinkie Pie has enrolled you into the morning class."
Receiving my tilted head of confusion as a response, she continued.
"You're going to school now so you can receive an education, and I'm going to be your teacher."
Now after hearing that, I was finally able to put two and two together as my eyes widened from the realization. Now I knew why I was here, and it was not an idea that I wished to entertain.
"No, I do not want to go to school,"
I flatly said as I looked at Pinky with pleading eyes. Spending time with the Crusader was bad enough. School would probably just be worse in my opinion. Desperate times calls for desperate measures.
"You're a silly filly, Aether. You spend all your time inside reading and learning, and now you don't want to go to school. If you don't come here, then where can you learn?"
"Pinky's right, Aether. You need a balanced education as well as interaction with those of your own age,"
Cheerily said. Looks like there's no way of getting out of this. Fuck! After watching Pinkie Pie sign some paperwork, which may be the most serious thing I'll ever see her do, she waved goodbye before bouncing off to go back to her job at the bakery. After the entire class was assembled, my introduction was made before all the fools in the class who stared at me in a, well, very creepy way. However, as I stared them down, I noticed something off about the class. Just what is it that's bothering me? Let me see. Brown filly, blue filly, light blue coat, yellow filly, grey filly... Wait. Philly, Philly, cold, Philly, 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 cold, Philly. What the fuck? 3/4 of the class are females. That actually explains a bit if this is a gender ratio standard or the class is a fluke. Got to ask about this late. My train of thought was interrupted by Cheerly nudging me with her hoof.
Aether, go ahead and introduce yourself,
she said as she gave me a supportive smile. Releasing a sigh, I looked at the class as calmly as I can as I said,
Hello, my name is Aether Aura. I came to this town over a month ago and I used to speak different words, so I do not talk so good with your words. I live with the Cakes and Pinkie Pie and it is nice to meet you all.
I was never one for speeches. To my misfortune, the moment the fools learned that I used to speak a different language, the floodgates broke as a rush of questions came at me.
What language did you speak? What is it like learning equestrian? Do you speak other languages? How many do you know? Why did you speak a different language in the first place? Why don't you know equestrian? Where did you come from?
As the barrage of questions came at me, I simply folded my ears against my head as I gritted my teeth. Fortunately, Cheerly came to my rescue when she said,
Class, calm down.
As the fools began to quiet down, Cheerly continued.
Now I know you're all excited to ask Aether all those questions since her native language isn't equestrian. Asking her all those questions at once is overwhelming her, and she may not understand what you are asking of her in the first place. So save your questions for recess and only if Aether wants to answer them.
With that, some of the foes let out an awe as Cheerly turned towards me.
Now Aether, it's time for you to take a seat so we can begin class.
Giving her a nod, I walked down the aisle only to see that the bright diamond tiara and her accomplice glaring at me. I gave them a stern glare back, but not my death glare. I knew the odds of it working again were low, and I didn't want to expose the rest of the foes to that quite yet. Walking past the brats, 2 unicorn colts came into my view, and compared to the rest of the foes here, they looked, well, stupid. The tall one was looking at me with a rather blank look in his eyes, while the short chubby one was smiling at me, though his eyes weren't much brighter than his companions. Walking past them quickly to avoid as much interaction with them as possible, I finally took a seat in the back. It wasn't close to the 2 colts thankfully, but it was close to Sweetie Belle, who turned to give me a small wave and a smile, which I half-heartedly returned. With me properly seated, the class finally began with Cheerly starting with some writing on the chalkboard. After watching for a while, I saw that she was teaching them something related to writing. Sadly for me, I didn't understand a single thing. One thing I did learn was how fools normally wrote. They had their pencils in their mouths. After slightly gagging at the sight, I noticed that the filly over to my side was writing quite well, causing me to wonder that maybe they used their mouths because it made writing easier than if they used their hooves. Still, fat chance of me putting a pencil in my mouth. Instead, I checked out the books in my bag, pulling out the one that looked the simplest to me as I opened it up on my desk to attempt to read it. However, before I could even get started, I heard a voice say,
Miss Cheerly, Aether isn't doing her classwork.
Looking up, I spotted Diamond sneering at me as Cheerly looked at me.
Well, normally a fool should be doing their classwork, but I've been told that Aether doesn't know how to read and write yet in our language, but...
Cheerly said before she spotted that I had a book open. Walking over to my desk, she looked down to see what I was reading, which caused her to smile as she said,
Oh my, you're trying to learn how to read, Aether? That's smart of you to try to do something related to the subject.
Giving her a dumbfounded nod, I watched as she returned to the front of the class, all the while Diamond glared at me due to her failed attempt to get me into trouble. In response, I simply gave her a smile before returning my attention to my book. After an hour, the tone of the teacher's voice changed for a bit, causing me to look up from my book to see her wiping the board clean, probably for another lesson. Before I tore my attention away from her, I saw that she was writing down numbers instead of letters, hinting that this was a math lesson. Finally, something that I can work with, I thought to myself as I gave her my full attention. Sadly, it ended in disappointment as I learned that the class was working on multiplication, which was way below my current understanding of mathematics. I returned to my reading, but after a moment I heard Shirley calling out my name, causing me to look at her again.
Aether, we're moving on to math now, and you should try to watch so you can understand mathematics. It's an important part of your education.
Shirley told me, to which I gave her a blank stare, not a deadpan one, cause it would be disrespectful, before raising a hoof into the air.
What is it, Aether?
Pointing at the equation on the board, I said,
8 times 9 is 72.
Blinking in surprise, Shirley looked at the board before looking at me.
You know and understand our numbers and math symbols?
I gave her a nod, since it didn't take me long to learn the basics of their numbers and mathematical symbols due to it having a similarity to the common mathematics.
My numbers are like yours, so more easier to learn than your words.
I explain.
Oh, just how much math do you know then, Aether?
Shirley asked as my classmates began to look at me with curiosity. If I tell them the limits of my mathematical understanding, they may get suspicious. On the other hoof, it may let me off of math work so I can return to learning their writing and language again. I could always make the excuse that I was taught at an early age.
I know a lot of math. This math too easy for me,
I said, hoping that I was right about being freed.
Alright, Aether, return to your readings, but I need you to stay in class during recess. Yes, Shirley,
I said as I returned to my reading, though I had no idea what recess is. Time passed by until a couple hours later, Shirley dismissed the class as she headed over to her desk, pulling out some papers before trotting over to my desk.
I was originally planning on waiting until you knew how to write, Aether, but since you said you're so good in math, I might as well give you the math portion of the assessment test. This way I can know just how much you really know, though you don't have to do the word problems since you probably won't be able to read them anyway,
she said before placing the papers on my desk. Putting my book away, I looked at the papers to see all the math problems on it. Though I only understand half of what Shirley said, I knew that I was giving a math test. Shrugging to myself, I used my magic at first when I started the test, later shifting to my right hoof after feeling drained from using the magic too long. Right after the class returned, I raised a hoof as I said,
Done, Miss Shirley.
Walking over to my desk, she grabbed the test as she said,
You did that test faster than expected, Aether. You better not be rushing to get it over with.
Before she placed the test on her desk before turning to the chalkboard to teach the class something new. Curious, I waited to see what she was teaching, to which I learned that she was teaching the history of the world. Finally, something that might be useful to me, I thought to myself as I gave her my full attention.
Today, class, we'll be learning about the transition of power and duties between the ancient unicorn tribe to Princess Celestia and Princess Luna, where they gave the responsibility of raising the sun and moon to the princesses. On the...
Shirley said before I rudely interrupted the class by falling out of my desk as I lost consciousness due to what I just heard. They can move the sun and moon? Were my last thoughts before my mind blanked out as I passed out on the floor. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this next chapter of Distorted Fate, and if you did, hit that like button and subscribe, and here is your daily dose of brainwashing. Bye.